Does this work? I guess I can talk about this.
This is another microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and use it.
Let's see if it works. Let's see. Test, test.
Perfect. Use it.
What does that sound? Test, test. Yeah, shall we start now, do you think? You said that 10 minutes. Yes.
This has not been opened.
This is Suzanne Sterling.
Yay, Suzanne!
I have to do one more song. I can. Yeah, I can introduce myself.
Expo and people coming through this.
Acknowledge.
Just acknowledge that we're here.
Okay.
The expo and us making us all work together.
Absolutely. Jim Stewart of Earth Day LA.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. And you work with the Sierra Club on their global warming project?
Sure.
Okay. 1 minute. Yeah, so she's doing this song as well. Yeah. Let's give a big thanks to Suzanne Sterling. I wanted to start with Suzanne's music because it connects us so deeply to our hearts. And other than being in nature directly, there's nothing that I think connects us to our hearts and to what's important in life quicker than listening to such soul-stirring music. So one more time for Suzanne. Good evening. My name is Scott Catamas, and I'm really happy that you're all here. Can you hear me, by the way? Am I good? Okay. No, well, maybe just for a minute, but then once we get to the slide presentation, it's... but while we got the lights on, I want to ask all of you a couple of questions so I can get a sense of where to put my input. How many of you have seen the movie An Inconvenient Truth? Just about everyone, okay. How many of you believe at this point that global warming is a significant problem? Okay. How many of you believe that it's a really, really significant problem? Okay. In the spirit of the Conscious Life Expo, how many of you believe that in your lifetime you are going to experience a very profound, or you already are experiencing a profound spiritual transformation? How many believe that our planet is going through a big spiritual transformation? Yeah. So we all are pretty much in alignment, and that's good. What I'm going to do is, you can turn the lights out. I'm going to very, very briefly go through just some of the initial images as kind of a reminder, but then I'm going to focus pretty much on solutions, because my sense is the majority of you already get it, you know it's a big problem, and you're here because you want to find out about the solutions. Is that accurate? Is that a pretty, yeah. I don't know, but for how many of you has this picture, has this image been a really significant image for you? This was taken, I don't know if you know the story of this picture, it's the most duplicated photograph in the history of humanity. It was taken on the very last Apollo mission, so it's the very last time that we were deep in space, we had human beings deep in space, and it just so happened that the sun was behind the Apollo capsule, and that's why they were able to get such an extraordinary photograph of our beautiful planet Earth. This next image is actually Earth spinning in space. They took 3,000 different photographs and put it all together, but this is not an artificial rendition. This is what our planet looks like. And what that is one entire day. One entire day of rotation. I'll go do it one more time. This is one day on planet Earth. And obviously our beautiful planet Earth really needs us to become stewards of the Earth. And that, to me, is what it's all about. Most of us have known for some time that we're here to be stewards of the Earth. But there's a lot of new science that's really come out. This particular slide was significant to Al Gore. And the reason he has it in there is, you might remember from the movie, that when he was a young boy, he was in a classroom, and they were looking at an image of the Earth, and he said, "Hey, does it look like Africa and South America were once connected?" And the science teacher said, no, that's impossible. What a stupid thing to say. And of course, we later now have discovered that, in fact, they were at one point connected, as this image shows us. And the importance of that is that sometimes we think for a long time something is a certain way, and then we discover that we have new science, we have a new understanding, we have a new awareness. And as all of you know, we now are in a very new awareness that our planet absolutely is going into something significant. And for those of you, you're all hip, you know it's happening, but we still have the job of waking up mainstream America. This is a quote by Mark Twain, by the way, and it's a good point. And I feel like in being stewards of the Earth, it's our job to help wake people up to, yes, humankind's footprint has made such an impact on our planet, and we need to really change that impact. I don't really think you all need to know how global warming works. How many of you want to go through the science of global warming? I'll do it if need be. How many have a need to understand the science of it? No? Okay, so we're gonna skip then. Because as stewards of the earth, really, our job is to communicate to people who don't understand. So I'm going to kind of to that part quickly. But there's a couple of images that are really worth reviewing. And so I'm going to go through them a little bit, just as a visual reminder of, yes, our world is changing dramatically. The Snows of Kilimanjaro was a famous book, and soon there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro. This is Kilimanjaro now. The snows are basically gone. The glaciers are melting at a very, very rapid and dramatic pace. And one of the things that we're going to be talking a lot about is how quickly things are changing. I found in the presentations that I've been giving, by the way, I trained with Mr. Gore the first week of January, and this is the 6th presentation that I've given since then. And I found that probably the statistic that most people really relate to that's most dramatic is the changing of the glaciers and the flooding that's going to happen. And this is something that's pretty easy for us to get a visual image of, and also to really understand how real and how serious this is. And right now, because of global warming, our glaciers are dramatically melting. And there are 3 places on the planet that are melting at a very rapid pace. The ice cap that covers Greenland, Greenland is an enormous country, but it is landmass, but it has this ice sheet over it, and that ice sheet is melting. And the estimates are right now that that ice sheet will melt in the next 30 to 35 years. And if that happens, it will raise the oceans around the world 20 feet, a 20-foot rise as a result of melting. That's huge. A 20-foot rise means that half of San Francisco will be gone. About 2/3 of Manhattan will be gone. In China, there will be about 30 million people displaced from their coastal cities. And I'm kind of sharing this with you just as we take a look at the dramatic difference. And these are images that show us that this change is really happening very, very quickly.
What was the time span in the next 20 years?
35 years. But here's the scary part. That's just at the Greenland Iceland, if the ice shelf off Greenland melts. There are 2 other places that are melting very rapidly. One is the Arctic cap of the North Pole is melting very rapidly. And also West Antarctica is melting very rapidly. And I'm going to go straight to that, as a matter of fact. So give me a moment to go to that slide. I'm skipping way past, since you already know, but the floodwaters part is really an important part for us to understand. Way back in 1978, it was stated that, one of the warning signs of a dangerous warming trend is Antarctica. Well, it is breaking up much more rapidly than scientists realized. How many of you are familiar with the Larsen ice shelf? About that. I'm going to go through it quickly, just because it's part of simple things for us to understand. So when you're talking to Uncle Fred in Alabama, or when you're talking to somebody who thinks, oh well, the Al Gore movie, that's just, I'm not a Democrat. This is not a political issue. This is science. This is something that's happening. It's not about Al Gore. It's not about politics. It's not about being Democratic or being a green or being left. It's about understanding the science of what's happening on our planet. And kind of to go back to what I was talking about is that there are 3 places that are rapidly melting. And if any one of them melt, any one of them, each one is equal to about a 20-foot rise in the ocean. The Larsen ice shelf, which broke off, they knew that it was in danger, but even the top scientists, by the way, this is an actual visual image of it, top scientists didn't expect it to break off for at least anywhere from 1 years, and in a 30-day period, it broke off. And nobody predicted that. It came as a shock. The scary part is, the truth is that most science, most new research findings, of course I've been very tapped into this for the last 2 months, and it seems like every week or two there's a major new report that comes out. And each major report tends to be more dramatic. The science is not giving us, oh, well, it's not as fast as we thought. In fact, actually, it's happening faster than we thought it would. If you take a look, you can see how quickly, in a week, it broke apart. This is still another week, and in a period of about 30 days, it completely broke apart. And one of the reasons that scientists are beginning to understand that is that our imaging wasn't taking into account what's happening underneath the shelves, where it's kind of melting from the inside out. And so it's dramatic, and it's scary. It's very, very scary. What happens when the sea level is, I'm going to move forward quickly. This begins to show us how quickly we're going to lose. And we, by the way, have already lost the first island. A relatively uninhabited island is gone now. But a relatively uninhabited island has already sank as a result of global warming. But for those of us who live in coastal areas, it's going to be very serious, very, very serious. This is talking about the West Antarctic ice sheet. And again, if that goes 20 feet, and all of the estimates are anywhere from 25 to 35 years. Again, 25 to 35 years before we lose the West Antarctica ice sheet, 20 to 35 years before we lose the Greenland ice shelf, 25 to 35 years before we lose the North Pole Arctic cap. And each one of those, losing each one of those, represents about a 20-foot rise in the ocean. So it's very serious. It's going to happen in our lifetime. In our lifetime, we're either going to experience turning this around, or we're going to experience devastating consequences that, unless you were in New Orleans during Katrina, or unless you've happened to be somewhere where a really major event has occurred, we can't really imagine. Again, I'm going to move forward because you already know a lot of the kind of scary science stuff.
And we haven't turned it around yet. At what point will we know that the turning around has begun? Can we turn it around?
That's a really good question. In a moment, we are going to get to the solution. The good news, we absolutely can turn it around with the science that we already have. We don't need a magic bullet. We don't need to come up with a form of science that that we don't have yet. But what we do have to do is we have to dramatically change our habits and our patterns. And I promise you we're going to get into that probably in about 10 or 15 minutes. I want to go through a couple things, but we will get to that. It's not black and white. It's not like turning on a light switch. Either we make it or we don't. My understanding, what Mr. Gore and most of the scientists that were with him have presented, is that even if we stopped all carbon emissions today, the temperature is going to go up about 2 degrees. That's inevitable. Now what happens is when the temperature goes up 2 degrees worldwide, it's felt the most at the top and bottom of our planet because of the way the sun hits the North Pole and the way the sun hits West Antarctica. That's why those 3 places feel it the most and are melting the most quickly. If we don't turn it around, we're looking at about a 5-degree increase in temperature. A 5-degree increase in temperature would really be devastating. Life as we know it will change radically.
5 degrees centigrade you're talking
Yes, we're talking 5 degrees centigrade.
10 or 11 degrees Fahrenheit.
By the way, this is my partner to present, Jim Stewart from Earth Day LA. And Jim's much more of an expert on solutions than I am, so I'm going to turn it over to Jim when we get to solutions in a moment. So it's a matter of how quickly can we turn things around, and it really is about changing our consciousness. And we're going to get into some specifics in a moment. Let me go back to, the whole point has to do with carbon emissions, and I just enjoy showing people a few more images. These are just a few more to really lock in. I mean, look at this. This used to be a waterway in the Egyptian desert, and now it's completely gone. It's just gone. All that's left are boats. Why is it? What an image, huh? Look at those coal plants. Look at these things. We are launching carbon emissions at such an enormous pace. And this next little section I want to get to has to do with how the United States is really the huge part of it. You're all representatives. I'm really imagining you're all here because you want to learn how to educate other people. You want to do kind of what I'm doing. The United States contributes 30% worldwide warming. Now, here's a couple of numbers, again, to just keep in reality. We have about 5% of the world's population. We're consuming almost 40% of the world's resources. And we're responsible for 30% of the carbon emissions that are causing global warming. It is absolutely up to the United States to take a leadership role. And it's tragic. In the year 2000, things went in such a direction that Al Gore wasn't elected president. George Bush and Al Gore did have something in common. They both had a big agenda in mind if they were elected. I think we all know George Bush's agenda was to go into Iraq and to have an enormous military force in the Middle East. That was his agenda. And look at how much money that's cost. And Al Gore had an agenda probably about as intense about his agenda. His agenda was to stop global warming, for the United States to take a leadership role in that. So one of the things that people are going to say to you quite often is, oh, but isn't the big problem India and China? No, actually it's not, and I'm going to show you some more numbers about that. These are the carbon emissions per person worldwide from the major countries. There's China, India, Russia, the European Union, and Japan. And look at us. Our carbon emissions per person is almost twice any other country. It's about us. And look at how far above the world average we are. I mean, it's up to us. I'm going to keep really emphasizing this for about 5 more minutes, because we need to take responsibility, we as Americans. And I want to say I'm humbled. I thought all my life I was this good little environmental activist because I recycle and I'm a cling nut. Lumina can tell you about that. What I've done is a fraction of what I need to do. I need to radically change how I view my relationship to carbon emissions. And it's humbling. By the way, you have all received, hopefully, 3 flyers that, of course, you can take home that give very specific solutions, and we'll talk a little bit about those solutions. But just a little bit more about the United States. Again, people are going to say, well, what about in China? Well, yeah, they definitely have an issue. But again, look at the United States. We're twice China. We're 5 times India. We're 5 times Japan in terms of what we're doing. Now, there are 3 factors. And again, this is kind of educating you so you can understand what most people are going to say, well, what's the big issues with global warming? What's causing it? And there are 3 primary factors that are causing it. One is the population explosion. Here's an interesting good news, bad news about the population explosion that I learned from Al Gore. My mom was born in 1918. Most of our parents were born probably between 1918 and 1930, something like that. And in our parents' lifetime, if most of our parents live to be 80 or 90 years old, the world's population will go from approximately 2 billion up to, in about 2030, we're looking at about 9 billion. It's amazing. I mean, in one lifetime, from 2 billion to 9 billion. So yes, in our parents' lifetime, in our lifetime, we have observed an absurd population explosion. But here's the good news, and I didn't know this until studying. It's leveling off. And actually, almost all population experts agree that we're going to level off at 9 billion, and it's actually going to stabilize there. And the reason for that is because there has been such good education of women. The nonprofit organizations that have been working on population control understand that the key is educating women in third world countries, and that's happening. And so I don't feel like it's a place we need to put our attention. It's actually being handled. The second place, of course, is the scientific and technological revolution. Our footprint has become really, really huge. And there's no doubt about that. We have, because of our new technology, and all that's happened again in the last 100 years, we put an enormous amount of carbon into the air. I kind of skipped over those slides, but they've been able to go back and project how much carbon was in the air and what the temperature was for the past 650,000 years. They do it by going and measuring ice rings. We right now have twice as much carbon in the air as we have had at any other time on the planet. Now, there's a natural carbon emission as plants die, as animal life and plant life die off, there's a natural amount of carbon that goes into the air. But we have, because of our scientific and technological footprint, because of our carbon emissions, it's doubled. And there is absolutely no doubt about it, a direct correlation between carbon emissions and temperature. So that is why we absolutely, it's a scientific understanding now, are causing this global warming. And again, imagine the difference if your body temperature goes up from 98.3 to 100.3, which is going to happen no matter what we do. That's pretty significant, and you're not going to be feeling great, but you can probably survive. But what happens if you went up to 103? Could you survive at 103? Could we survive? How many human beings could be functional and surviving if we went up 5 degrees? And we are a direct reflection of our planet, of our Mother Earth. The third factor, and what I'm going to focus on, is our way of thinking. And that's what this next little part of the presentation is going to be. It's about changing our way of thinking, because that's what has to happen. In order for us to make the shift from a perception that we've been living in, our way of thinking has to change. Most of you remember the analogy, but it's really worth repeating. If a frog jumps into boiling water, what's going to happen? It'll jump right out. It's a knee-jerk reaction, and that's how human beings are too. 9/11 happened. It was this huge, dramatic event, and the Bush administration was able to utilize that shock to our system to invade Iraq and to launch this huge military offensive and all sorts of other things. Most of us, when we have a major accident, a major illness, something that happens suddenly, it grabs our attention. Same frog, if it's in a little pot of lukewarm water and you turn up the heat underneath that water, the strange thing about it is the frog won't jump out. If it heats slowly, it'll become uncomfortable, but it'll stay in that pot of water until Al Gore comes in and rescues the frog. We all, being the human species, have been frogs sitting in an ever-boiling pot of water. It's been getting worse and worse. Al Gore's known about it for 20 years. He ran for the House of Representatives in Tennessee because he thought if he became a congressman, he could really raise consciousness about it. Well, a few people listened, but not too many, so he thought, well, I better become a senator. He became a senator. Few people listened, but nobody really paid attention. And he became vice president. He thought, okay, well, now I'm vice president, people will pay attention. Well, some people paid attention, but he also got the nickname of Geeky Gore. And there goes Geeky Gore talking about his global warming trip again. And not enough people paid attention to the point of really making the change. We were frogs in that pot of water. The good news is people are beginning to pay attention now. And I'll get into some of the positive news in a moment. But I want to right now talk about 3 misconceptions. To Uncle Fred from Alabama, or your mother, or your brother who's conservative. There are 3 issues that most people tend to say, oh, well, what about, and I want to go through those 3 misconceptions so that you're educated about it. Because if you are educated about this, you're going to be much better messengers about this. The first misconception is about, well, isn't there disagreement among scientists about there being a problem or not? There is not a disagreement. There certainly is a disagreement as to extent, the degree, nobody knows for sure. But in terms of consensus about humankind is absolutely responsible for carbon emissions going up dramatically, and that being directly related to global warming, there is no doubt and no scientific dispute. And let me show you something interesting. The number of scientific studies done during the last 10 years that were peer-reviewed, 928. Now, the 928, how many of them disagreed with the consensus that greenhouse gas pollution has caused most of the global warming? 0. None out of 928. Take a moment to memorize that. Now, here's something interesting. Our media really is where we get our information. You all know that. The fact is that the American Oil and Petroleum Institute and several other corporations specifically, deliberately created a movement to confuse people. And their cynical objective, as stated in a secret memo that was leaked to the press, was to reposition global warming as theory rather than fact. And what's really tragic is they were successful. And this is not something that is a first time. I mean, this ad from the 50s reminds us of what happened. The American tobacco companies knew that cigarette smoking absolutely led to cancer and severe diseases, and rather than owning it, acknowledging it, they launched an expensive and successful campaign to confuse people. So, recently, did they succeed in the misconception about global warming? Again, 0% of the peer-reviewed scientific articles, but from articles in the popular press, 53%, half of the articles that came out in the popular press, the major articles in Time, Newsweek, over half had something in the article that presented that there was some doubt. And so that's why there's the misconception about it. Is that clear to everybody? Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? Isn't it scary that a few people can come in, control and manipulate the media in such a way that America as a nation can be so confused about something? This is the other side of it. And for any of you who are big fans of George Bush, and I'm sure that there's many of you in this room, this might be a bit of an eye-opener. But for those of you who aren't so much of a fan, this may be just more of the same. But it's actually pretty scary and pretty tragic. There's a man named Philip Cooney. He worked for 6 years as a lobbyist for the American Petroleum Institute. This is the organization who specifically was caught red-handed trying to misconception about global warming. That was his job for 6 years until George Bush became president. And guess what? When George Bush became president, Philip Cooney got a new job. He was hired as the chief of staff at the White House Environmental Office, where he proceeded to rewrite and edit every paper, everything that came through about global warming, casting doubt about it. I've pulled out, because there's about 20 slides, really too uncomfortable to even look at, where you see his handwriting, crossing out stuff. Anyway, a New York Times reporter outed him, and a big article came out in the New York Times in June of 2005 showing that this guy had been with the American Petroleum Institute, that he was clearly repositioning global warming as theory and not fact. He resigned under pressure and immediately took a new job. And let's see what his new job was. He left the White House and went on payroll of ExxonMobil. This is reality. This is really scary, huh? So we can't count on the Bush administration to kind of get the word out to people. It's up to us. And it's hard. You know, even Philip Cooney, I don't think he's evil. This was written 100 years ago. When somebody's livelihood, when their money is dependent upon believing something, I'm sure he probably believed it. O.J. Simpson probably still doesn't think he did it, Really, have you read, the articles with him? I mean, it's outrageous. I won't go there. But humankind, we have this thing that happens in our mind where we will go delusional, Did you read the article in the editorial in New York Times? My buddy Lucky, who's in the audience, just pointed out there's an article in New York Times to talk about how Dick Cheney has become delusional because it's so painful for him to acknowledge what's going on in Iraq that he's gone delusional. So, anyway, I think we got that first misconception handled. Let's handle the second one. And this is another one. Well, don't we have to choose between the economy and the environment? That's been a big misconception, that if we really deal with global warming, if we cut down on carbon emissions, it's going to hurt us in our pocketbooks. Well, guess what? That's not true. First off, this is Al Gore's favorite slide of his 300 that he gave me, or gave us. There were 200 of us in the training. This is his favorite one. He pulled this out of a White House textbook. This is a White House textbook that he found, where the White House was talking about how we have to find the balance between our need for economic efficiency and keeping America afloat financially and the planet. Well, let's look at this image for a moment. This is my Al Gore imitation. Inside, gold bars. They sure look yummy, don't they? Gold, America, capitalism. And hey, you know, it's only Earth, it's only planet Earth that we're trying to outweigh there. What an outrageous image. What value is having financial gain if we don't have a planet? If we are not going to have a planet in our lifetime that's inhabitable if we don't turn this damn thing around. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, Jesus, they're part of the 144,000, and they get to ascend and be with Jesus, and you know, we're New Agers, so we get X's on the forehead. So let's take a look at something. Comparison of fuel economy. Again, this is all about economic issues, right? Japan has a very high fuel economy emission standard. The European Union just passed Japan. Australia, Canada, United States, not too good. Look at how pathetic we are. It's pathetic. China, by the way, they're going to say, well, what about China? China is way above us. Now, here's where it gets really embarrassing. California, our state, our great state, God bless California, I'm a Californian. We just recently passed a law, which incidentally the big three automakers are trying to stop in court. And our law is to get our fuel emission standards by the year 2016 to that level. It's a law, and we're like the leader in the country. I mean, we're way ahead of the United States. We are the leader in this country. So the good news is California is the leader. The bad news is this law, which is so revolutionary, is in 9 years going to get us to where China, no, actually not even to where China already is, and not even close to Japan or the European Union is. It's pathetic. And the big three automakers are trying to stop it in court right now. Now let's take a look at market capitalization a little bit. Toyota and Honda were the first ones to really understand the value and the economic value of the Prius and of hybrids, and look at how they're doing. How's GM doing? Not very good. Ford is doing even worse. So it's a myth. Japan got it. They have the highest, other than the European Union, in fuel standards. Their cars are the most efficient. Their profits are going way up. We're way behind, and we're going down. Now, here's some good news. Some of the large corporations are coming around. Actually met Paul Anderson. I'll go back a moment. Actually met some of these people. Linda Fisher from DuPont. Go back a bit. I met Paul Anderson when I was in Nashville. He was there. General Electric has come around. I don't know if you all saw, but last week, 10 major corporations with Al Gore there all signed an agreement to go carbon neutral. And we're talking big corporations, General Electric, which owns NBC, DuPont, Walmart, and several other very large corporations. So some of the big business leaders are coming around to understand that we really need to change things. So this is very good news. This is very, very good news. I mean, even Walmart is coming around. Okay, so here's the third misconception, and this is, I'm now going to go into a more detailed response to the question that someone asked in the back a little bit about, well, is it too late? So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who's going to go into a little bit solutions. But this is, again, something to memorize. We already have the solutions. We don't have to come up with a magic bullet. We have the solutions, but we have to change. We have to change. And I think at this point, Jim, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I guess we're clear that it's going to involve renewable energy. That was wind, this is solar. And here's a graph that Gore presents about how we could actually dramatically increase the amount of renewable energy that we are currently using. And I can go into more detail on these 5 different types in a second here. So the big question, of course, is, are we going to continue as we move up in what they call a business as usual? In other words, as we have used and consumed and produced energy over the past century, or are we going to do something about it? And of course, one of the things that we can do is electricity efficiency, and I'll be glad to talk about that. Then there's a whole set of other kinds of efficiencies involving buildings. There's the passenger vehicle efficiency, which of course is a ridiculous situation because, as Scott just showed, the Chinese and all the other countries have very efficient vehicles, and why don't we, right? Another transportation efficiency, of course, would be the increase in the use of mass transit, bicycles, walking, etc. And finally, we can get efficiencies on our supplies here. Okay, so now this would actually be stabilization. In other words, right now we're at around 1 or so gigatons or billion tons of carbon per year, and we could get
1.8. We're in the middle.
okay, we're at 1.8, right, exactly. And so the point is that what we could do is we could get down to, under this scenario, around half of that, but that's actually not enough. In other words, someone asked, how do we know when we turned the corner? And the next, uh-oh, what happened to it? What happened to my slide here? So it's lost. So what happened was, I guess we used a different version, right? We loaded one version, and then you apparently started a second version for this presentation here.
Can I say something about Kyoto while you figure out how you want to handle that?
Well, I've just got to quit this thing.
Okay, here, let's escape for a moment. Let's go back for a moment because I want to talk a little bit about Kyoto because this does lead to something that we can do. Hang on, where were we?
I can go back to Kyoto.
Just
but
go back to Kyoto for a moment.
Okay.
How many of you are familiar with the whole Kyoto Treaty and all of that? Do you all know about that?
I've heard about it, but I don't know the specifics of it.
What it means is, quite some time ago, in Kyoto, which is in Japan, a treaty was ratified by almost every country on the planet other than the United States and Australia. And it was to reduce dramatically our global emissions. But this is something that's important for us all to understand. This is something very specific that we can do. Let's leave it on this for a moment, please. This is something that we can do. We have the ability as human beings to exert a lot of pressure on our political leaders. So even though the George Bush administration didn't ratify Kyoto, has ignored it, hasn't even dealt with it, 22 states now have ratified Kyoto on the state level. Over 300 cities have supported Kyoto on the city level. So at all levels of government, city council, state government, federal government, I'm going to go back a slide, we can affect change. So one of the things that I want to invite all of you to start doing is write, call, even your local legislators and ask them, where do they stand in terms of becoming carbon neutral? Where do they stand in terms of global warming? And that you can only support from now on politicians who have a clear stated commitment to doing everything they can while they're in elected office to becoming carbon neutral. And likewise, there's the political side of it, and then there's also the business side of it. And I encourage you, when you go to Trader Joe's, when you go to restaurants, when you go to businesses, talk to the manager, talk to the owner, talk to whoever the highest decision-making person is. Ask, what is your store or your company's policy on becoming carbon neutral? Because I can no longer support businesses that are not carbon neutral. And I'll give you just a really quick little example. Lori Grace, who's my partner on this, wasn't able to make it today, but she's been doing a lot of research about what it really cost in terms of carbon emission into the air. And I love Trader Joe's. It's like my favorite store. But do you know that anytime you go to Trader Joe's and you buy a little basket of blueberries that they've shipped in from Costa Rica, that little basket of organic blueberries from Whole Foods or from Trader Joe's, put 6 pounds of carbon into the air to get it, that little basket of blueberries from Costa Rica. So one of the things we need to do is start shopping and really supporting locally grown foods, local things that don't require huge amounts of transportation. This is one of the big changes in our shift. And it's enormous change in our consciousness. But if we can change our consciousness so we're not just going for what I'm in the mood for, what I really want, but what is leaving the smallest carbon emission footprint. In other words, what is requiring the least amount of transportation in order for me to consume products and to utilize products that require the least amount of carbon emissions in order for that product to get to you. Is that clear for everybody? And this is, I think, really one of the biggest things that we can do. So again, get into the habit of talking to local politicians, get into the habit of calling and talking to your local businesses. I'll give you one last story about this, and then I think Jim will be ready. I was in Kauai a couple of weeks ago doing this presentation at a Kauai Wellness Expo, and the mayor of Kauai was kind of walking around, and I had met him once before, and he's kind of a big Hawaiian guy. And he's got a lot of, he's a big guy. He's got a lot of power, and he, was walking around really, with that kind of energy. And he came into my room just before I gave my presentation. I said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. This is fantastic. I would love for you to share with the audience." We're about 15 minutes before I was going to start my program. I'd love for you, Mr. Mayor, to share with the audience what you're doing on Kauai to become carbon neutral. And when I said that, his face literally changed before me from this kind of powerful guy. He looked like an 8th grader who hadn't done his homework. He got like this, this deer in the headlamp kind of look on his face. And I said, "You do have a carbon neutral program, don't you?" And he said, "Well, we're still working on that." And I said, "Well, you do understand, if global warming isn't dramatically reduced, you're going to lose your entire coastline around this island. This island's going to be devastated. You understand that, don't you?" He clearly didn't. He didn't know this. And I could tell by the look in his face, and he started panicking and I explained to him, well, I just got back from training with Al Gore, and it was amazing watching him. Thank God it was only just the two of us. And honestly, I'm glad he was embarrassed. I wouldn't have wanted to humiliate him in front of the whole room, and I'm glad it didn't play out that way. But hopefully he was embarrassed enough to where, maybe now he'll start paying attention to this. And who knows, maybe it's going to take another 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 people to ask him about it. So that's why we all have to start asking everybody who's in a position of power, whether it's political power or economic power, what is your position on becoming a carbon neutral company or bringing down carbon emissions, and only supporting businesses and political officials who that is really part of their reality. This is something very important. How are you doing here?
I don't know what happened here.
One says today 4:10.
Yeah, I thought that's the one I brought up, but this is a little frustrating because I had this all set up, I thought, and now apparently it's vanished. But it's no big deal. I can just talk it through, that the situation, in order to really turn this thing around, oh, here we are. I'll be darned. We got it. Okay, good news.
Do you want to, I think you have a screen behind, though, that somewhere that you need to.
Yeah, right. I have to actually go to look at the slide, so, right? Right there, play. Okay, so now.
Yay, there we go.
So now, Representative Henry Waxman is the representative for the Santa Monica area, so we're actually almost in his district right here. And he's taken the advice of the major scientists across the world, which is that the actual climate level has to go from where it is now around, this is globally, 7,000 of these million tons, in other words, 7 gigatons, to about 1,000 gigatons. In other words, that's what it will take to reverse our situation. And fortunately, this is also the goal of California. Governor Schwarzenegger has also taken the advice of the same scientists, and so both of them. So we have an actual law which is in effect in California to do this reduction, and we have Henry Waxman's proposed bill, which I believe it actually might pass the House. I don't know about the Senate, but anyway. The other thing that I want to talk about briefly just is the fact that the American Solar Energy Society has come up with a way for the United States to get to this 80% reduction. And they have a whole set of methods of doing it. And I mentioned before that energy efficiency, and there's, of course, a whole variety of energy efficiencies in terms of using compact fluorescence, in terms of turning our thermostats a little bit higher in the summertime so that we don't have our air conditioning on so much, in terms of course, insulation, of more efficient cars, etc. And they think that 57% of these 80% reductions could actually occur by 2030. And this whole slide is using known technology. There's nothing that is yet, on the drawing boards. Everything is ready to go. It just simply takes the political will to make it happen, and we're hoping that you can help us on that. So concentrating solar power is large solar power situations in the desert. There's, of course, photovoltaics on top of buildings. There's wind power. There's biofuels. This is the ethanol thing, and they think that it's probably only going to be good for 5%, and we could talk about that if you want. Biomass, of course, is the actual consumption of waste products. In other words, when they are doing some kind of process of, like harvesting wheat or whatever, and you have all of the shucks, you can put them into a modern, efficient kind of producer of electricity with biomass. And geothermal has a great, great potential because it is using an unexhaustible source of the energy of the heat of the earth. And of course, we could go into details here about how we could deal with architecture and how we could achieve a 50% greenhouse gas reduction in new buildings, and of course, transportation and industry. Now, Scott's mentioned carbon neutral, and all of you have on your seats, hand me this thing, a sheet of paper that says, help save the planet, be carbon neutral. And all you need to do is to go on this website, and I've suggested there are 4 of them, which any of the 4 are fine. You go through a little series of questions, and maybe we've got a slide on what the questions are, right? There's how much energy are you using in your home, how much energy are you using in your car, and actually the other thing that is on these websites is not here, and that's your airplane. How much do you use in terms of flying? And then if you fill in those forms, and it takes about 2 minutes or something like that. You can either use the average for your size house, or you can actually go ahead and calculate how much you pay per month for your electric bill and your gas bill and that kind of thing. And you come up with a number, and then you just enter in your credit card number, and every month then they deduct a small amount of money. I was shocked, actually. I went in a car and a small apartment, and it only cost me $10 a month. So for $10 a month, I am able to neutralize all of the heating and cooling and electricity and my computer use in the house, my driving around, and my airplane flights to see my mother a couple times a year. So the point is that $10 a month pays for my portion of a windmill or wind turbine that completely counteracts any of my remaining carbon emissions.
There's also companies that plant trees. That another option you can do is there are nonprofit organizations that, if you want to say, let's say you're taking a trip. My partner Lori did this. She wanted to see how much carbon we put into the air when we flew to Nashville to train with Al Gore. She made a contribution to a nonprofit organization that plants trees to balance out that carbon emission, because the more trees we plant, the more we help to balance out our carbon emissions.
Yeah, now I actually don't recommend that. It's a good idea, but I don't recommend that. And the reason for that is that people say, oh, well, I did my thing. I neutralized one trip. No. You need to be carbon neutral. And the only way to be carbon neutral is to take care of your home, your car, and your airplane. And then after you've done all that, and you've only put in 2 trips home to your mother, and then you're making another extra trip, so okay, fine. So then go ahead and do that. But the primary thing is every one of you could be carbon neutral in 5 minutes when you get home. Just plug in one of those websites. Any questions on carbon neutral?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so everybody's clear.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. What's the question?
I'm just wondering, I've heard more and more that products are, we're encouraged to go more vegan lifestyle in looking at our footprint. And I don't understand that. Do you know about animal-based products and why that could be a harm to our environment?
Very good. I think that's a really good point, and it is the 4th item up here on the slide.
The question has to do
Oh,
with
I'm sorry, yes.
about going vegan and why reducing our consumption of animal products is connected to global warming. There's several different things. One is that there's a tremendous amount of energy that goes into, especially meat, red meat production. Huge amount of energy. A lot of energy to actually transport the cows, transport the meat, process the meat. It's a very, very carbon-heavy product. One fantasy that I have is that eventually, whenever you buy a product, just like now, when you buy something, you look at the label, and the label tells you, if it's a food product, what the ingredients are, the order of the ingredients, carbs, fat, etc. Hopefully someday, all products we buy, you'll look at the packaging and it'll tell you how much carbon emission went into producing this product and getting this product to you. So you're looking and you go, oh, I don't want to support this product. It's way too high carbon emissions. But I will support this product. And what Katrina brought up that's really valuable is that by going vegan, or at least dramatically reducing meat consumption, some dairy consumption, it really does help in many, many ways. Also, in terms of cows, the amount of methane gas that cows emit into the air is actually also enormous, and one of the issues that helps. It's not one of the significant ones, but it's enough to where it definitely does add to the amount of literally crap going into the air.
As well as clear cutting the rainforest for them to grow.
Yeah, totally critical. The preservation of the tropical forests is a key
Good point.
to our stabilizing the emissions of carbon. And so that if there's any, so we shouldn't eat anything that would involve cutting of the rainforest. I actually eat Brazil nuts because that helps. But okay, so then actually on the handout, it lists all of these kinds of things that are on these sets of slides here. So
How
I
many
can
of you-
just flip through all those very quickly
Let me
and
talk
then
about
go
this for 1
ahead.
second. How many of you are using compact fluorescent light bulbs? Please switch over if you aren't, everything you can. You can get these now at most places, Home Depot, almost everybody carries them. And it really makes a big difference. And so let's all really switch to using these. If you're not familiar with it, come on up afterwards and I'll show it to you.
And of course, there's lots of things that we can do to reduce our emissions from our driving. And of course, working from home is the best if that's a possibility. And then, of course, whatever you have left, then you can make carbon neutral on one of those websites. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question about solar energy.
Yes.
I own a house in Topanga, and I've been wanting to switch it over to solar panels, and I've been hearing a lot of controversy about the process of solar panels and them causing more waste and them adding more pollution to our environment than actually helping. What do you
Okay, so
think
that's
about that?
actually true. The question is does a solar panel produce toxic waste? And the answer is yes. The construction of the panel does take, of course, some carbon to run the machines to make it, but it also produces some toxic waste, which, of course, needs to be cleaned up and treated as all toxic waste is in California. And so the bottom line is that don't worry about that. In other words, the bottom line is buy those solar panels and put them in because we need to do everything we can to combat global warming, and that will do it.
The solar panels are absolutely a good thing. Gore and all of his people promote it. And, you know, it's a trade-off. Does it cause some toxins, as he says? Yes, it does. But the trade-off is solar power is where we need, it's one of the major places we need to go to. We really need to switch from a coal-based form, because still coal is the primary place where most of the United States gets its electricity from, is from coal-burning plants. And we do need to go solar and wind as much as we possibly can.
And
If you don't have the money to put them, I have a company that will put them on your roof for free.
Fantastic. And
hey,
what's your
all
name,
right.
I have cards here, rent solar panels, they will rent them to you, they'll pay for them, they'll install them at no cost, and charge you rent.
Yeah,
Less than you're paying now, and guaranteed not to go over 25 years.
exactly.
They want to put 25% of the
Yeah. Solar panels are completely free because you can pay for them with your savings in your bills. So make sure that everybody gets that who can. And then the other thing, do not want to leave out your workplace. If you have any influence over where you work, if you can make your company go carbon neutral, or if you can do any of the lists that's on this slide, you can be a very help. And then, of course, the community priority list, we need to be involved in our community planning, and I can talk to you about that. I'm working with the Sierra Club, and we have a number of committees in the local Sierra Club chapter, and I'll be glad to talk about that. And, of course, the whole world is it here. So this basically is the end of our presentation.
I've got a couple of things I'm going to do
But
still.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll switch places. Yeah. So we're going to wrap up with two things. Let's thank Jim. What I wanted to do is show two more things and then maybe do a little. Are there any questions, by the way, about what we've done so far?
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have been thinking about selling, I have two cars actually, and I've been thinking about selling them and buying a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come across a lot of questions in my head and things that people have brought up to me about, well, the fact that I'm going to be selling these cars, somebody else is going to be driving them and adding pollution to our planet. And how much is it really helping, you know? Because then if I'm buying a brand new hybrid
then that's a whole other, like, thing of stuff that, you know, is like brand new and.
You know, it's a trade-off. I think it's a really good, these are great questions you're asking. Again, we have to change our consciousness. So by driving a hybrid, more people are seeing your hybrid on the road. And your friends are seeing that you've chosen a hybrid. And it's a transition. We're not going to make the change in a day. We do have to make this change in our lifetime. So buying a hybrid, inevitably, all cars only have a certain amount of lifespan. And so shifting to a hybrid, as well as really changing our driving habits, learning to, you know, walk as much as possible, take lunch to a meal place, not drive far distances. We have to change in so many ways. And then there's got to be an enormous change in consciousness in our lifetime.
I do have one point, and that is that if you could hold off for about 2 years, you should buy what's called a plug-in hybrid. These current hybrids that we have are really old technology, and we really need the new kind of thing, which is that when you get home, you plug it into your standard light socket, charge up the batteries overnight, and then you can drive up to miles without using any gas. And so that's a plug-in hybrid, and we hope that they'll be, they are going to be on the market within 2 years. Yes, go ahead, please.
I have a question. First of all, you need an awfully long cord. Anyway, that was a joke. I said you need an awfully long cord. Well, for the plug-in. It's a joke.
40 miles.
But what I was going to ask was, what are the implications about the electrical energy circuits that are inside a car that's electrically, you know, a hybrid which has electrical circuits in it, and we are very sensitive to electrical energy, and the whole idea of a lot of people that are energy sensitive is to lock it. And has anybody looked into that?
There's no difference, basically, in the electrical composition of a regular car versus a hybrid, because they both have a lot of electricity. The only thing that you in the plug-in hybrids is you would have these batteries, and fortunately the batteries are just like 12-volt batteries, right? So you don't get any emissions effect. In other words, there's no bodily effect from 12 volts.
Yes, Ed.
I want to say that next year Honda is going to be coming out with the hydrogen fuel cell cars that have power plants about the size of a city in them. Of course, the downside is there's no hydrogen power plants. I mean, fuel stations around yet. But the other thing in terms of your solutions, I want to encourage everyone. About a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, they had a United Nations global warming conference, and you can just look up the United Nations global warming and see the links for that and download the recommendations. But basically, there's a pretty blanket suggestion that all countries take part in the solution right now.
Thank you. And I want to thank Ed, who did a really great job. Ed Ellsworth and the Sunrise Center were really significant in making this happen, so let's thank Ed. I think I see a hand raised back there. Yeah?
Yeah, it's me.
Hi, yes.
I have two. One follows on from yours, and the other one goes back to the cars.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I know that I have read about the 200 people that were trained with Al Gore.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Oh, there you are.
and so I don't know if we're going to address this, but I would really love to know how they see the figures expanding out in terms of the educational process, because we don't have a lot of time, and it doesn't seem like very many people. That's one question. The other one is, I'm living in Greece right now, and I know that your whole projection is America because of the high levels. But I mean, Athens is one.
Actually,
So how do we?
yeah.
How do we? I mean, is there any program being developed within or without the Gore
Yes.
organization for the global education? Because I mean, that's where we have to be. Surely.
Yeah, actually, Al Gore decided when as this has really grown, that obviously and take his little slide presentation to all the places it wanted it. So he realized the next step, there's many next steps, one step was to train 1,000 people worldwide. And he actually has already done a training in Australia. They, of course, have done 3 trainings now in Nashville. At my training, there were 200 people, including actress Cameron Diaz. And Leonardo DiCaprio came to the next training. We were going to show you, but we won't now. There's a really 5-minute video that Leonardo DiCaprio has produced, paid for, that's outstanding, all about, that he narrates all about global warming, that kind of sums it all up for people. It's very dramatic. If we have time for it, how many people would like to see that? Oh, okay, all right, so let's show that then. Yeah, if you could set it up for people. So we'll take a look at that, but just to finish answering your question. So Gore has done training now, his US people, and training's going to be in Europe in April or May. I know my good friend Emerald, who lives in Bali, came to a training. So they are going worldwide. Of course, he focused mostly on the United States initially because that's where he has more power, et cetera, et cetera. He's also going to do a training in China. He's been working very closely with Chinese political leaders.
So, but is it set up on a tiered system? Say, for example, you're making a presentation now, you were one of the selected people. Okay, but how do we then, I mean, we're listening to this, but we don't have all the facts down. I mean, how do we...
We're all learning.
Once you see it's expanding...
I don't have all the facts down either. I'm learning as I go. And we're all learning together. And, you know, Jim knows more about certain things than I do. And there's things you know in the audience. The gentleman knows more about solar panels than I certainly do. So we're all here to raise each other's consciousness. And only one step. 1,000 people worldwide to do this. That's one step. Another step that he's doing is encouraging people to have home parties where they show an inconvenient truth, which is pretty easy. Now, here in California, at the Conscious Life Expo, how many saw the movie? Almost everybody raised their hands. So that's not quite as important. But, you know, back in Georgia or other places, that they're still at the place where just seeing that movie. And by the way, that movie got great reviews, even from very right-wing, red state newspapers. Recognized that it was, thank God, a well-made documentary, and it's probably going to win the Oscar next month, or later this month. And so there's different stages, and we all have to help educate each other. It's not about waiting until one person. We're all sharing.
My question, immediately when I saw the movie was, okay, is this being produced with subtitles in every language around the globe? So I could go back to Greece and I could arrange to have showings?
Yes. I can tell you which languages. I don't know offhand which languages it's been in and not, but...
Can you tell me who I would contact to see if I can...
Yeah, you go on the website. It's called climatecrisis.net.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. So, are you ready?
Ready?
Okay, so this is Leonardo DiCaprio's contribution to global warming education.
I don't know how the sound is. The sound is on or not?
All right, well, let's take a look and see, and I'll turn off the lights.
Perfect balance to maintain life. In the cold depths of space, this planet is a virtual paradise, the only one known of its kind, and it is our planet, Earth. But something is wrong. The life-sustaining systems of this planet are breaking down. What happened? Us. Human civilization and our relentless consumption has brought this planet to the brink. But specifically, our destructive one single resource may push us over the edge, and that resource is oil. Oil is essentially ancient sunlight. Since the dawn of time, plants captured sunlight. After billions of years of decomposing in the earth, this fossilized sunlight became a fuel, oil, coal, or gas. This ancient sunlight has become modern civilization's battery pack. The problem is, oil is a finite resource. We are running out of the very thing our society is dependent on in order to function. But worse, our burning of oil and other fossil fuels has dumped over 700 billion tons of carbon pollution into the atmosphere, as if it were a sewer. We are altering life on this planet as we know. How? The accumulated pollution causes the atmosphere to trap more of the sun's heat. The Earth's surface temperature is actually going This is what is known as global warming. Warming that almost sounds inviting. That in a world 20 years from now, we will all be living in a tropical paradise, where the extent of our problems will be pondering which SPF sunscreen to use. But don't be fooled. Thousands of climate scientists agree that global warming is not only the most threatening environmental problem, but one of the greatest challenges facing all of humanity. The 1990s alone have been the warmest decade of the entire millennium. Temperatures have already gone up by 1 degree Fahrenheit in the last century. Maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. It only took 4 small degrees to shift us out of the last ice age. When you turn on the TV and you hear about killer heat waves, extreme weather conditions, freak storms, drastic flooding of cities, rising sea levels, giant chunks of ice breaking off from the Antarctic, reefs bleaching out and dying, make the connection. It is global warming and climate change. In the face of this disaster, what have big corporations and politicians done about it? Unfortunately, not enough. The fact is they've gained too much money and power off our addiction to oil. This makes them dangerously resistant to change. But are we? We must demand a separation between oil and steel. We can get off oil and slow down global warming. We can use energy more efficiently and support renewable, clean energy sources, new green technologies that don't burn carbon like hydrogen fuel cells, wind and solar power. We can vote for leaders who care about protecting your health, the air, and the environment. We can support nonprofits who are making a difference. We can be environmentalists. So get educated, stay educated, so we can think for ourselves, and join the fight to save this unique blue planet for future generations.
Yo, Leo. So, it's free off the internet.
Yeah, I just downloaded it free of charge from a website. If you just type in global warming, it pops right up.
Yeah, just Google it. So I'm going to conclude. Suzanne, would you be willing to come up to the harmonium for a moment? I'm going to conclude by taking us into a little bit of a meditation and a visualization. And I really want to thank all of you. And we'll do about a 3-minute, 4-minute visualization, and then Suzanne will play music. So I want you to close your eyes, maybe put your feet planted on the floor. And I want you to just imagine yourself in this room right now. Here we are, February 10th, 2007. And I want you to build in your consciousness, in your mind's eye, a bridge between this moment and the end of your life, the time when you're going to leave this body temple. Maybe it's your dying day, or maybe it's right after you've died, depending on how you can imagine it. But I want you to imagine that you're looking back at your life. And I want you to imagine, let us all imagine right now, we made it. In our lifetime, from this point as adults, we played our role as individuals, and we as the human species made this extraordinary shift. We changed. In our lifetime, we changed from the way we had grown up, where we just consumed without really thinking much about it, over-consuming, hurting our world in ways we didn't really understand, to understanding and then changing. In our lifetime, we became stewards of the earth. We watched the generations, each generation after us, have a higher and higher consciousness about the footprint that they were making on the planet. So I want you to imagine, here we are, our life is ending. And I'm imagining feeling so proud and frankly relieved that we made this extraordinary shift. How blessed we were that in our lifetime we didn't have to go fight a war. We didn't have to kill another person. We didn't have to fight a warring tribe. But instead, the battle we fought in our lifetime was changing consciousness, changing our consciousness, becoming true earth stewards. So let's feel that pride, and Goddess bless us, Divine Mother, Divine Father, may we truly gather the education, learn, change, and share with others. Thank you. Thanks again for being with us, and thanks again, Suzanne Sterling.